You have four. I imagine the first was probably harder than the second, third, and fourth, but I don't think a lot of people talk about what that identity transformation was really like, because it really is that. And I underestimated that big time.
Yeah, because it's not necessarily like you have a kid and then you go, you're out on a paternity leave and you go back. You have a kid and your body changes, how your brain works changes, how your everything about that changes. And then you have all of the psychological, all of the mental health, all of the physical health, everything. It all just sort of turns into this giant storm. And everywhere you go to look for connection or to look for community or to look for people that are standing there going, yeah, that happened to me too. I experienced that too. It's just people trying to tell you that you need to get back to what you were doing before. Like motherhood's like this like truck stop. Like having a child is like pulling off and getting gas on the side of the road, but like get back on the road and like carry on in the same direction. You're like, no, there was actually an exit at the truck stop and now I'm like not even on the highway anymore. Like what? But people like everyone drives on the highway. So you have to want to be on the highway. And if you don't want to be there, then what is wrong with you? Hello and welcome to the And Both podcast. Here we are going to hear from moms and those in motherhood that are doing the thing that works for them. They are honoring themselves alongside the all-encompassing role and level of expectation that is modern motherhood. And we are going to hear from as many different people as possible in their own experience. So you can find people to relate to. You can hear stories that will make you laugh, make you cry, all of the above. And that we will come together as a community to support one another in a way that is holistic and honoring of the woman and the mother as a whole. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the And Both podcast. I am here today with Jessica Murray from Empower. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to talk to you because I feel like what we're going to talk about, or what I would like to talk about, is something that a lot of people can relate to. So before we dive into that, why don't you let people know a little bit about you and all that?
Yeah, sure. So I'm the founder and owner of Empower. And to put it very simply, Empower partners with small business owners and early stage startup founders to streamline their operations and accelerate sustainable growth. I like to say that we're really here to serve their partners, our partners, to design their businesses for long-term success and shorten the distance between where they are today and where they're trying to go. I launched the business earlier this year, and I'm sure there's plenty we can talk about how motherhood sort of threw me into entrepreneurship, even though it's something that I always thought that I wanted to do. So it's been fun to build the business. And when I'm not working on the business, I'm generally found with my 2-year-old, who is the future CEO of our family, if she's not already. So yeah.
I love it. Yeah. Future CEO. I feel like that we really got to get into that as a t-shirt because we need some serious messaging around like, come on up and I'm doing this thing so that you can roll into this thing after me.
Yeah. We need more strong women around in the world. So I try to harness her strong will and confidence and determination, even though as a parent that can sometimes be a challenge.
Yeah. I have one of my daughters is definitely she has a way of thinking about things. And I noticed that when she was really young, before she had the language to like match what she was trying to get out there, the level of frustration that she had was like off the charts.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And then as she got older and was able to express herself, like she still has these really strong feelings and I still want her to like express everything that she wants to. But now I've noticed she has a much more like she uses her words, but she's using them in a way that just falls in line with what she wanted before. It's not like she's just telling people where to go and how to get there. And she's so much more relaxed now that she can get it out there.
Well, maybe you and I can meet offline and talk more about the tactics you use to harness that, because our daughter is the same. She definitely gets very frustrated when she's trying to do something or wants to do something and either can't find the words or doesn't yet understand the emotion, or just physically can't do the thing. So
Yeah.
definitely trying to find all the tools to help her navigate through that so that hopefully in a couple of years, like your daughter, she's able to sort of process that in a more constructive way.
Yeah. Yeah. She's 6 now. So, but when she was 2, she screamed every morning. So
Yeah.
I am, I am there. Like my neighbor is a pediatrician, and I would sometimes lean out the back door and be like, she's not actually injured. She's just trying to pour like the juice herself, and it's not working. And she was
Yeah.
like, that's cool. I have one of those too. She's like, she was in her early 20s then. She was like, I get it. Because it sounds terrible.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
The daycare parking lot is always a scene for us.
Oh my God. Yes. The transitions are hard, moving
Yeah.
from one space to the next. And you're like, no, but this is your time now to go do this. And they're like, no, I don't ever. I don't ever want to do the thing that you're telling me I need to do. So that's always a joy, I imagine.
Yes.
All right. So the thing that I wanted to ask you about when you were writing about, you had written something about the transformation from individual to mother and the transformative process into motherhood as someone who was very career focused and career driven, and all things lead to the next promotion, the next rung up the ladder, all of that stuff, and then motherhood hits you like a bus to the face kind of thing. I do agree, like you had said, like people don't really talk about this, and people sort of feel like, I think what happens is people feel like they have a plan, therefore everything will be fine. But the plan does not include the other human who is a part of the plan.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that I experienced, even though once I started talking about some of the challenges I was having, everybody was like, oh, yeah, same. But I think, and I had a child a little bit later, like I was 34, I think. I can't keep track of time. So, a lot of my friends or my husband's friends had already had kids. But I don't think enough people or women talk about what that was like when they were going through it and the sort of internal struggles they may have had with trying to balance being the type of mother they wanted to show up as, being the type of partner they wanted to show up as, and the employee or executive or manager, etc. And for me in particular, and I come from a family of strong, successful women, and I had always, been able to successfully, get the next promotion or navigate my career. And I sort of had this path in mind. And I was like, oh, I've always done really hard things. Like I'll be able to tackle motherhood and the hard career and all the things in the same way. And it's just not how that happens. And I just wish more moms or parents, really, for that matter, it doesn't just have to be the mother, openly talked about that rather than you having to tease it out after the fact, because I think it would make people feel much more secure when they're going through some of those hard decisions or inner struggles or feelings, and also make them feel not alone. So I mean, it's not like I'm out there, preaching this, but like personally, I now am a lot more open to talking to people about what it was like for me in the first year. And also I started, and we can talk a little bit more about this, but I interviewed my entire maternity leave for a new big job, which I then started when my daughter was 3 months old. So I'm now a lot more open to being honest about what that experience was like and kind of the struggle I went through, because I think it helps more early parents who don't know how to handle those feelings, and also makes them feel like they're not alone and like they can ask for help, or, if they need to vent about how hard it is or how it might not feel fair, if they don't feel judged by like coming to talk to someone like me as a friend about it. But yeah, I think it's challenging. And I don't know what
Yeah.
the experience was like for you with, you have 4. I imagine the first was probably harder than the second, third, and fourth. But, I don't think a lot of people talk about what that identity transformation was really like, because it really is that. And I underestimated that big time.
Yeah. I think that so much of the focus is in so many areas that we consume information is getting back. And that
Yep.
just does a huge disservice to to moms. It does a huge disservice to parents, but really it does a huge disservice to moms because it's not necessarily like you have a kid and then you go, you're out on a paternity leave and you go back. You have a kid and your body changes, how your brain works changes, how your everything about that changes. And then you have all of the psychological, all of the mental health, all of the physical health, everything. It all just sort of turns into this giant storm. And everywhere you go to look for connection or to look for community or to look for people that are standing there going, yeah, that happened to me too. I experienced that too. It's just people trying to tell you that you need to get back to what you were doing before. Like motherhood's like this like truck stop. Like having a child is like pulling off and getting gas on the side of the road, but like get back on the road and like carry on in the same direction. You're like, no, there was actually an exit at the truck stop and now I'm like not even on the highway anymore. Like what? But people like everyone drives on the highway. So you have to want to be on the highway. And if you don't want to be there, then what is wrong with you?
Yeah, I've never thought of that analogy, but I do like that highway analogy. It is. There's like a fork and you don't really go back to that same highway or road. And I mean, some people can and do, and that's great. But I think there's like a lot of societal expectations. There is that sort of expectation that like you have a mother, you go on leave, and then you keep doing exactly the things that you've been doing at the same pace that you were doing it. And I think that expectation just puts even more pressure on a high pressure situation.
Mm-hmm. And you also have, to add more pressure to it is if you don't come back and perform at that level because you are in either full, part-time, whatever responsibility, you're always thinking about what's going on with this whole human being that has to go out and that you're responsible for. Then it becomes an attack on dedication to work. And it's like,
or if you are dedicated to work, it also then becomes an attack on, are you dedicated as a mother or a partner? And so the juggling act and feeling like you're balancing everything perfectly all the time, what for me personally was like a very difficult mental struggle as someone who is type A, somewhat of a perfectionist, always striving. Like you just constantly feel like you're failing. And you're not failing, but it does often feel like you're not doing things well enough or to everyone's expectation in all aspects of your life.
Yeah. And you can't find, like you're saying, you can't find the connection of someone else waving in the crowd going, yeah, over here. Me too, because everyone is trying to tell you that you're supposed to get back to wherever you're supposed to be.
Yeah. And I think the first experience where I felt like there was another one of those people is, I don't know, my daughter she might have been like 7 or 8 months old. And I was like having a tough week. And I went on a walk with one of my friends here and I started describing it to her or how I was feeling. And she was like, we literally stopped walking. And she was like, you have to realize you are not the only person who goes through this. Like you are not alone. And what you're feeling is completely normal. And I broke down because not because I was so like upset, but I just finally felt so validated and like I wasn't crazy and I wasn't failing and my feelings were worth having and like someone was listening. And it's kind of crazy to think that it took 7 or 8, however long it took. But that was really like the first time I felt like I could take a sigh of relief and be like, oh, this is somewhat normal and what happens. And people do go through this like real transformation or for lack of a better term and sounding somewhat dramatic, but like an identity crisis of like, who we are and what we want to be. So yeah, I definitely was not expecting that and was overly confident about my ability to just kind of like push through and get back on the highway in the exact place that I left it.
Mm-hmm. I also wonder about people that feel like that, like, get on with it kind of idea is that sort of like when you don't talk about the transition and then you do you get to that point. Like, can you imagine if you went on that walk and your friend was like, yeah, that happened to me. You just sort of got to keep going. It wasn't like that person didn't normalize your experience. If that person didn't normalize your experience or, offer some sort of connection element to it or all of that stuff. Like, I feel like that just being able to see a person face to face and say, this is really hard for me. And them saying, this is not just a you thing. This is an everybody thing. I feel like that's an area where people really need to feel seen or to hear a story or something like that. And I worry that there are a lot of people out there that don't have that, like people that are more isolated or people that are just don't think that they can call someone and say, hey, I'm struggling.
Yeah, and I think, it might be one of those just like things people say about women, but like I think it is hard for some women to even ask for help, right? And there are a lot of people who probably wouldn't even like think to talk to a friend or think it's appropriate to talk about those feelings. Like I've had people tell me that they're like, "Oh, we don't feel comfortable talking about those sorts of things." So yeah, my message to new parents is like definitely try to find people in your community or other parents that you can talk to about your experiences, because chances are, even if they aren't the same, because everybody's journey in parenthood is different, you probably can find something to relate to that will make you feel more validated, like you're not going through it alone, like it's not as easy as some people make it look on Instagram or social media. And like it's real. Like the things that you have to go through as a new parent are real and hard. And it's probably the hardest thing you'll do in life.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, for
it's not
sure.
just a 3 month, they're a newborn and you're sleep deprived. It's like every couple months is a new phase that you have to adjust to and, make choices about. And, you know, it becomes it goes from, oh my gosh, I need to keep this little human alive to, oh my gosh, I really need to shape this person's character. And that's almost scarier in
Mhm.
some ways.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I mean, my oldest is in middle school now, and I'm like, there's sometimes that I look at her or, my second is finishing up elementary school, and I'm like, I wish for the days when my responsibility was to keep you like fed and dry and rested, because it's such a mechanical period of life. And that's not to say it's easier, because it's all hard. Like everything's hard.
yeah.
But like having to navigate the emotional stuff that comes later and those conversations around bigger topics. I mean, we just had an election, and that's been a whole thing in my house about, you know, all the different ways that people hear about the people who are running and the outcome and what that looks like and the future and all of that stuff. And kids are so much more aware that now than they were. But the thing that I also don't want to sort of skip over or not mention is this idea of people feeling like they can't reach out and ask for help because they feel like this is the thing that like they always wanted, or this is when you have somebody throw it back in your face saying like, but you wanted this, so like you have to sort of like deal with it, like you wanted to do this. And I have friends that have gone through like fertility treatments in order to have kids, and or people that have adopted kids. And so it's this idea of like having to do these extra steps and these extra, it's a more protracted road to parenthood that way. Then you have these kids or you adopt these kids, and then there's struggle like there is with any parent. And it's this idea that like then you doubly can't say anything because you worked so hard to get to this place. And I feel like that's a further isolating thing. Like people say like, "Oh, I know like I went through all of this and now they're here, but like this is really hard and I'm not really sure that, I'm enjoying this or whatever." And then you layer in gratefulness, and that's a whole episode all on its own. But I worry that I always want to make sure to point out, like, no matter how you come into parenthood, it's hard. And
Yeah.
if there are parts of it that you do not enjoy or that are stressful or a huge struggle, lots of hurdles. I mean, there's medical diagnoses, there's all sorts of things. You still have to reach out to people. And hopefully the people that you're reaching out to understand that it is all hard, like your friend.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And the other point, and I think this is something that I had a hard time with too, is just because you make a different career choice once you become a mother does not mean that you don't care about having a career, doing big things, being ambitious, being successful, etc. It might just look different than what you thought your path would be before
Yeah.
you had a kid. Because just because I decided to get off the corporate, let me become a COO at a big organization ladder for right now in the season of my life, I intentionally started a business to build a successful business and to be able to help a lot of entrepreneurs and small business owners be more successful. I didn't just do that because I wanted a hobby or a part-time thing. I'm working just as many hours as I did, when I was at my other job. And I think that's another sort of misconception of parents who might change their path for either a season of their life when they become a parent, or that becomes the long-term path that they want to be on. And that shouldn't have a bearing on whether they can hack it or whether they still want to be successful or have careers. It's just different. And
Mhm.
I think on top of the, people have trouble or challenges reaching out for support, I think it's also challenging when people take different career paths and, feel like they might be labeled as, I don't know, not caring as much about their careers or not working hard enough or whatever it is. And I think that's also something that I think more people should talk about and normalize more than it is.
Yeah. And I mean, especially like just from a logistics standpoint, when you talk about paid leave and you talk about childcare and you talk about all of these other factors, like I think that people, when they talk about these things, sometimes they forget that these things exist because a human who cannot take care of itself has now entered the equation, right? It's not like you're asking for more vacation time so that you can go on a trip somewhere or whatever. Like you are responsible for a someone who cannot roll over, pick their head up, feed themselves, all of these things. And in order for you to be able to do those, to do your job or to show up in your career in the way that you want to, somebody has to help with that. So you can't do both. And so I think that there's a lot of, I wish that I had the statistic off the top of my head, but there's been a precipitous rise in entrepreneurship in motherhood because of these factors. I mean, I am right in the middle of the bullseye on that, like childcare, cost of childcare, logistics for moving people, like having my kids involved in activities and things like that. Like people always say, they're like, "Oh my God, you have 4 kids." And I'm like, I do have 4 kids, but I cannot, like I could not work clinically 8 to 4:30, and my kids would not be able to do some of the things that they do. So there are trade-offs there. Some of them are mine and some of them are theirs, but it's so the logistics of it and how you get from A to B is it runs the show.
Yeah, and you mentioned cost. Some of it's also availability. Like in our
Yeah.
case, we live in a really fast-growing city. We live in Nashville, and it its infrastructure, I don't think, has grown with the population.
Mm.
And it took us a year to get our daughter even into daycare. We were on wait lists at many daycares from the time I was 8 weeks pregnant, and she only got into one right before she turned 1. So there was both an availability and cost issue there because, I
Mhm.
mean, we were fortunate enough to be able to like afford a nanny share. And for a period, we had to have like a nanny, but there were logistical challenges with that too. And then, we were able to get her into daycare, but it took a year. And,
Yeah.
you know, so I think there's cost, there's availability, there's accessibility. And I think sometimes people just think like doing all those things are part of the process and it's easy and like you get your kid into daycare, or, you have childcare. And one, it's really expensive right now. And two, it's not always available when you need it. And
Yeah.
it's not always reliable. And that creates a whole other host of logistical challenges, which I do feel like, at least when I was in my corporate job, I do feel like people have gotten, maybe because of COVID, a bit more understanding of, oh man, your kid is sick and they can't go to daycare or you don't have childcare. So, like, yeah, you have to go handle that and like go deal with that and then come back. But that's not every environment. And that's really challenging. And then you have to do the trade offs with your partner if you have a partner. And it's like, well, who's covering this? And then you're debating like, well, whose day is more important? Whose work day is more important today,
Right.
right? And that's like always a challenging conversation.
And that leads to its own whole host of problems that have nothing to do with children and everything to do with everything else on the back end that like
Right,
people are
right,
really interested in, but no one is going to say like, oh yeah, here's the swamp that follows this logistical nightmare that I am in the middle of.
right.
For sure. So tell me about how you transitioned from corporate to Empower. Like, was there a moment when you were doing that and you were like, okay, this is not the way forward for me, and this is how I feel like I can move in a different direction, and this is what I'm going to do. Like, did you
Yeah,
have an
I can't
aha?
remember, like, I can't remember the exact moment, but I can kind of remember the feeling, which was I just felt like nothing really in my life was in my control anymore. And so, whether it was my daughter needing me all the time or I was in a very demanding big job at a global organization. So, I was at my desk at 7 a.m. and then I was working until, 6 and then would like hang out with my daughter. And, there were times where I look back now and I'm like, why did I do this? But I would like have my laptop in her room while like doing bedtime because I didn't want to have to be up till 10 or 11 p.m. like catching up on stuff that I couldn't finish in the day. Now that meant I wasn't very present in the moment as a mom. And, I look back on those moments and I'm like, why did I do that? But there were things like that where I just felt like I didn't have any control over my time or my energy. And I was really kind of taking a step back to reflect on like what was important to me, how I wanted to show up in a career and still have a meaningful career, show up as a present mother, show up as a good partner, show up as a friend, because that's a whole other thing that becomes challenging. And you're trying to divide your time between lots of different areas of your life. So I was reflecting a lot on that. And then I was thinking about all the things in work that like I really enjoyed doing and where I recall myself being the most happy professionally was when I was in early stage startups as an operator, working closely with founders and helping them dig through challenges that were really, in essence, helping them take their vision and translate it into practical execution. So, kind of putting structure and ambiguity, helping with system and processes. Like, those are the things that I really like to do. And I like doing that in the environment of sort of early stage businesses or smaller businesses. So, I like held on to that. I was like, this is what I really enjoy doing. I've always wanted to be more. I mean, part of the reason I got into startups in the first place, I started my career on Wall Street, was I really wanted to learn how businesses were built from the ground up so that I could eventually start my own business. I don't pretend to be the visionary who's going to have the unicorn idea, but I can help operationalize things so people can build their vision. And so I was like, well, I always knew the end game for me was going to be starting my own business or partnering with someone whose vision that I really believed in to build that business. So maybe this is the right time for me to be a bit more entrepreneurial and go out on my own. So once I had that in my head, I was like, okay, now I got to actually figure out if there's a need in the market for what I can offer. And I started just talking to people in my network who I knew were business owners or startup founders in all sorts of verticals and industries. And I started talking to them about their challenges, what their goals were over the next couple of years, things that they were experiencing or noticing in their markets. And there was just this just common through line of we're growing, we're seeing successes, but like we can't do it all, and we really need to focus on growing the business, the strategy, the product, et cetera. And we don't have anyone sort of behind the scenes helping us structure the way our business runs day to day to make sure it, one, doesn't all sort of like fall apart and the trains don't keep running, but two, to make sure that when we are ready to get to that next inflection point of growth or expansion, that like we are doing that in a sort of like sustainable way. And so I was like, oh, great. I'm hearing this common through line of challenges of things that I've solved in the past and that I can help people with. Awesome. Maybe people will pay me for this. So then I started, I started structuring what I thought the offerings would look like and the types of businesses that I wanted to help. And some of those people I had conversations with said, you know what, if you really get serious about this, come back and have a conversation and maybe we can work together. So I, at some point, kind of decided like, okay, I'm really going to commit to trying to do this. And there were a lot of other things going on at the company that I was at that were also sort of influencing that it was going to be the right time. So I sort of made the decision. I put the line in the sand and I went for it. And I was very fortunate that when I launched, I did have two partners who were willing to work with me who have been with me a lot of this year. So it felt nice to sort of have clients at the get-go. But that's sort of the story and sort of how I got into to building this business. And it's been an adventure, but I am definitely feeling more rewarded, more balanced in my own way. Like I said before, I'm still, working the same, if not more hours, but it's different. And I'm doing the work I really enjoy. And I'm, not at my desk at 7 a.m. and I get to have breakfast with my daughter and see her off to daycare. And I'm not bringing my laptop into her room at bedtime, which feels a lot better. Do I
Yeah.
still wish I maybe spent some more time with her? Of course. But I do feel like the time I am spending is more quality. And I think that's also an important thing to think about, which is not just the quantity of time, but the quality of the time that you are spending in each of your areas or facets of life, and just trying to maximize the quality over trying to spend the most time in each area.
hmm Yeah, I think that's a really great point because a lot of what it is like I would like more of this. Like I'd like more time here and I would like more opportunity here and all of those pieces. But really, if you had, if you hit the lottery tomorrow, I don't know, maybe some people are like, forget it, close my laptop, throw it out the window, never see that thing again. But like people that are people that are sort of driven in a way to build things and to create things and carry on. Like if you hit the lottery, would you go from working as many hours as you do to like half? Probably. But what would you fill that time with, right? Like would you have how would it change? How would it change in terms of like would you have more sort of ease and calmness because then you don't have that as a component to worry about like, your mortgage and your bills and all of those daycare fees and stuff like that. And would you pursue things in a different direction? Or I don't know. That's just I think about this sometimes. I'm like, if I negated all of these things that cause stress, what would I do? What would be my more of things? And that's sort of the direction that I try and move towards in terms of like goal setting for business and things like that. Like when I get to this point and this happens, then this is the thing I'm going to do versus like, I'm going to buy a house in Tahiti and I'm going to do all of that. Cause like
Yeah.
those things are all really great when you're sitting here like watching the blinking cursor, but that's not the day to day quality improvement that you're looking for, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I always think that's an interesting way to think about like how things could change in the moment in that regard. So the quality over quantity, I definitely underline that for sure. So how does it all like when you are doing these when you're working for yourself now and you don't have that like corporate like boundaries around there, like how do you navigate that for yourself at home?
Just in terms of setting boundaries or like
Yeah,
how I
like
sort
how
of
does
structure.
I feel like too sometimes it's easier to swing the pendulum like the other way and not to say like, "Oh, I worked 2 hours today. Yay." But like when you work from home and you work for yourself, it's really easy to just like, "Oh, I'm going to send this one email," and then you go down the rabbit hole. I may or may not be speaking from my everyday personal experience.
Yeah, I would say if you haven't caught on yet, I am a fairly structured person. So even out the sort of structure of corporate life, I do create my own structure and day. And so I I'm a big believer in like calendar blocking. So I very much sort of I mean I'm like looking at my calendar right now. It's very color coordinated and I try to spend a certain I assess the week or the month and I'm like, okay, what do I really need to focus on this week or month from a work perspective? And then I like build the calendar around that. And obviously things shift around, but I think that helps me one maintain like a priority of what I'm trying to accomplish and create structure around like what are the most important things from a business or client perspective that need to get done, but also like ensures that I'm like maintaining a rhythm because I think that's important too, especially working from home or working for yourself is you can have periods where like you're really busy and there's like a whole flurry of things and then there's like a lull. But for me, I feel like being able to sort of like structure my weeks and months and like actually physically putting in the calendar, like these are the things that I need to get done today, um, or week or month, like really helps maintain some structure. And like, obviously, as we all know, some of those things get disrupted or thrown out the window, but then I can easily like rearrange the deck chairs. So I don't know, maybe it's just me and my personality, but I actually don't, and the way I operate, I actually don't feel like it's been that challenging for me to create a work structure and a rhythm absent someone creating that somewhat for me in a corporate environment.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, yeah, that's also like another important consideration because some people do not do well without that. So it's like, I don't feel like I have control over my schedule. I work in a corporate setting. I'm going to work for myself, but I really need that structure in order for it to work. Like I want to make those decisions, but I need those boundaries around that work day and how to bring that home. So like your personality is also really inclined to be doing that. So I think that's also an important thing to point out because if it's not, then it's sort of like that's another big potentially big hurdle to get over in the entrepreneurship.
Yeah, and I think the one other thing that I'll add, which again I'm fortunate to be able to have and do, is my daughter's in a structured daycare program.
Mhm.
So like unless she's sick or unless the daycare is closed or unless something happens at the daycare, there are very set hours that I know that I can get uninterrupted work time. And again, I think that's a privilege, but that also helps, especially being on my own and structuring my own time.
Yeah. What is your like, your vision for the future? I don't want to say 5-year plan because that makes me
Oh,
that
man.
probably doesn't make you go, but I'm like, I got a 5-minute plan sometimes. Like I do have long range, but like because there's so much uncertainty with like people getting sick or, things changing and kids being interested in something and then they're not, and then holidays and I don't know, all of those. I know. I flipped the calendar and we get our Christmas tree the day after Thanksgiving because otherwise we either get our Christmas tree the day after Thanksgiving or like December 15th. And the kids love to decorate and all of that stuff and I get it and I like when our house is all holiday. No, I don't think that we should have Christmas stuff in Target in October. That's a whole other thing. But yeah, like how does it happen? The
I don't know. It's
recordings.
wild. I feel like it was just June, and then I feel like it was just April when I sort of left my job and launched this thing. So it's kind of crazy that we're already talking about Thanksgiving and that like I see the Christmas decorations in retail stores. And, I've been getting Black Friday emails since like before Halloween.
Yeah. Yeah, Target sent out their Christmas catalog to my house. Thanks. In October. Like you could still buy candy and my kids are like, "Oh my god, it's almost Christmas." I'm like, "That's weird." The world's upside down and we all forgot about Thanksgiving, which is my favorite holiday because you don't have to buy anything and you cook and you eat food and everyone gets together. Like
Yes.
I love that. Buy gifts or whatever. I mean, Thanksgiving can get really expensive quickly depending on if you're hosting and stuff like that, but yeah, like what do you so by like say like by April, like when you hit your 1 year anniversary, like what does that look like for you on your vision board? We'll call it that.
My vision board. I think after 1 year, I would like to feel. It's a good question. I think I would like to feel like all the clients I've worked with, I can say realize some meaningful impact by working with me and that I've made a difference in their business in some way, shape, or form. So I think that's one thing that's like very important to me. Like I did this to really help businesses grow. And while, especially with operations, it can take some time to see the fruits of that labor. Like I would like to be able to hear from each person I worked with to say, like, you really made a difference in what I'm building. And like, they don't need to say thank you, but just tell me what they've observed change. And, I think being able to see the future where I'm able to do a lot more of that work, right? I've been doing a ton of networking, ton of trying to build the brand and get the word out there about what I do. But really by April, sort of seeing through either pipeline or conversations or, engagements being signed that there is a sustainable future for myself building this business and helping other entrepreneurs sort of like accomplish their goals and see more small businesses succeed or startups succeed. So I think that, you know, that's what April looks like for me if I'm trying to reflect back on my first year of business. And then I think on a personal level, if I'm thinking about my vision for myself in April, it's, do I feel like a more balanced human, for lack of a better way of describing it? And am I proud of what I've been able to accomplish on a personal level in the past year? And do I feel like I've regained some of that control in the areas that I feel like I most needed it, you know, 18 months ago when I kind of was having that spiral of what are all these things happening in my life and why can't I seem to control any one thread?
Yeah, right. Like the sweater's becoming unknit, and you're like, I've worked really hard to build the sweater, and now everything is like there's threads everywhere. Yeah,
Yeah.
I like that. I like that too. That you also get, I think sometimes with starting your own business, there's sort of like a revenue goal, or there's these sort of objective measures that you use and say, okay, this is my measure for success. But you also have the subjective in there, and you have like, there are objective measures in saying, okay, I've helped this many businesses go from this to this, but also like you'll be able to see that you working with people has impacted their business in a like it's not necessarily that you're setting up operations. It's that those people are now able to grow and branch off and spend more time going out for fundraising and do all of that stuff and do the acceleration piece.
Yeah.
Which I think that's so cool because it's not just you, like it's you and like the web goes out.
Yeah. I mean, and not to be cheesy about it, but like the name of the business is Empower, to help empower business owners to get the tools they need to branch out and succeed. And like being able to play a small part in that, feel like there's an altruistic aspect of it. And, as I said earlier, it's the type of work I enjoy doing. And there's also the monetary aspect of it. So if I can make money doing it and be successful, then that's great. It's
Mhm.
fulfilling on sort of like both ends of what I need to feel fulfilled.
Yeah. I think too, it's important to talk about I think that altruism gets leaned on for women as as a measure of success, right? Like, don't you feel good because you helped people? And it's important to say I need to be able to pay my bills. I did not start a business so that this is not like my business is called Empowered. It's not called Mother Teresa 2.0. Like I'm not out here just dumping all my energy out and hoping people say thank you at the end of it. Your time is valuable, and it's valuable in terms of the quality and the moments that you spend with your daughter, but it's also valuable in the fact that you have this depth of education and experience and knowledge to do a very specific and targeted thing that can impact businesses. And that is not something that gets rewarded with. I worked in a restaurant for a very long time, so we call those verbal tips. Where people are like, "Oh my god, dinner was so great," and you go and you pick up the check, and they left you $5 on $150 dinner, and you're like, "Oh, that's nice, but I can't actually pay my rent with I can't call my
Right.
landlord and be like, "Oh, hey, I
Right.
did a really nice job. Table 17 said I was amazing." But that's I think that is also something that has to get talked about more too. You have a skill set and you need to get paid for that skill set.
Absolutely. I am a capitalist.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, for sure. And it's that's another piece, right? You got to make money, and it's great to have people say, "I am here to help other people, but you're going to actually pay me for it."
Yeah. And I think knowing your worth is an important thing too. And knowing the value you deliver and being able to communicate that is also an important aspect as an entrepreneur. But also, I do think that's something, again, that sometimes gets pegged as like women have challenges doing that, whether that's always true or not. But I do think knowing your worth, being able to communicate the value you deliver, being able to show it, you are like, you bring expertise, you bring something people need, and that will show. And you should get paid for that.
Hmm. And paid appropriately, not 70
Yeah,
something
correct.
cents on a
Yes,
dollar.
correct. Correct. Yes. Yes.
I feel like there's a lot of ways that we could veer off on this conversation when it comes to a capitalist perspective and or many different areas of motherhood and how that impacts this, because you're not getting paid to stay up and do bedtime, so you should get paid to do all of the things that allow you the time and space to stay up and do bedtime.
Yeah. We can leave all those other topics for another
Yeah,
episode.
right. I feel like that, yeah, that's a whole series. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, so what are you looking forward to in the more near future?
What am I looking forward to? It's a good question. I feel like as a family, we just did a bunch of stuff. So I feel like I'm just coming off of a lot of fun activity, also hard activity. But I don't know. I'm always looking forward to turning the page on a new year. Like this has been a good year. But I'm excited for what kind of year two of being a business owner looks like. I'm also excited to watch my daughter as a 2-year old, even though sometimes that's also a scary thing.
Hmm.
And, I'm looking forward to the holidays and being able to connect with more family and friends. But yeah, I think just the opportunity to continue meeting lots of different entrepreneurs and business owners. Like I've been doing a ton of networking and I have a lot of interesting events coming up in the next couple of weeks where, I'm just interested in sort of hearing from people about what they're building and sort of the things that are going well, the challenges they're having, trying to identify again ways I can help. I feel like this isn't the most interesting answer, but yeah, they're just small things here and there that I'm probably looking forward to between now and the end of the year.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, all the small things add up to big things too. And I think that's cool, being able to just to sort of chart your own course when it comes to this, like and how that entrepreneurship pathway goes. Like it's not paved, it's gravel right now. And that's really cool.
What are you most looking forward to between now and the end of the year?
I am most looking forward to, in my house, so all of my kids have birthdays between the last week in January and the second week in March,
Oh, wow.
including me. So we have 5 birthdays in 6 weeks. And that like it's like the birthday gauntlet. That starts in January, end of January. So right now I am looking forward to sort of that like sweet holiday spot where there is more collaboration and like people coming together in terms of like, we do a Friendsgiving and things like that. I'm excited about that. But also like I have a bunch of projects for Dovetail and the podcast that are going to be coming online. So it's sort of like, I think it's nice when all of these things can come through towards the end of the year, so that when you do turn the page and get into like the birthday tunnel and all of those pieces, I'm like, okay, I've taken care of. I mean, I don't know if this is the same for you, but I feel like when I have a bunch of things that sort of all get wrapped up for work, and I really like things that have taken months and months to put together and to go through and meetings and stuff like that, then it's that like deep sigh, and I can really like enjoy that time as, everyone's turning older years, and that just makes me sad and happy and all of that.
Yeah. No, totally understand that feeling.
Yeah. So if I know that we definitely have business owners that are listening and people that are maybe potentially going, wait a minute, this person can help me sort through all of the stuff that I have going on. Like how do people find you and connect with you and reach out or connect you to other people that they know that are looking for this?
Yeah, there's several ways people can reach out. I mean, the most direct way is probably connecting with me on LinkedIn or sending an email. So Jessica Murray, and my email's jessica@highempower.co. And maybe you'll have that in the show notes or something. There's some other more indirect ways to learn more about Empower and what we're doing. One's going to the website, and the second is I put out a newsletter biweekly. It actually comes out on Thursdays at 11 a.m. Central. So we're talking on a Thursday. It's coming out. This is a week that it's coming out. And that newsletter is all about providing hopefully valuable content to people who are building businesses and can take away some like actionable advice, either on an area of business building or being an entrepreneur that they may be struggling with, but also just sort of like personal productivity tips that can help them get 1% better every day. So I try to make it very practical and actionable, but also a little bit of fun. So that's another way that people can just get a better feel for what we do, what we stand for, and sort of like the things that we think about. And, there's also social media, Instagram and those sorts of things where people could follow and just get more information. But I'd say the most direct way is to either connect with me on LinkedIn or shoot me an email. I'd be happy to sort of set up a call and learn more about the business and the challenges people are facing and see if I'm the right solution. And if I'm not, maybe I can point them in the right direction.
I love that. I do get your newsletter, and it is good because I get a lot of newsletters, and some of them I'm on the newsletter, but I don't read the newsletter because for whatever reason. But yours I do read, and I like it. It's really helpful. So yeah. I feel like when you send out a newsletter, sometimes you feel like you just open your window and threw like the newsletter out there, and you're like, I hope someone likes this. So I always like it when people reply and say like, oh, this is important. So I
yeah,
do
no,
love it.
I'm so glad to hear that. And also I do think it has been interesting writing a newsletter. I do have a writing background. I studied journalism in school. So writing is actually somewhat fun for me, which I don't think for every business owner it is, but it has been rewarding to kind of get feedback like that, but also people reading the newsletter. And every so often someone will be like, oh my gosh, you wrote about this topic, and I know someone that you should definitely talk to. And so it's been great to sort of see how that's organically happened without, having to be people's faces being like, introduce me to someone. It actually shows that I'm delivering something that is piquing someone's interest, which is really what that's all about.
Yeah, name of the game in entrepreneurship. It's like selling what people are going to buy or offering what people are going to be interested in. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I will definitely get all of your contact info in the show notes for people. And yeah, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Ashley. It's great to be on.